Welcome to the Heart Rate Variability Podcast. Each week we talk about heart rate variability and how it can be used to improve your overall health and wellness. Please consider the information in this podcast for your informational use and not medical advice. Please see your medical provider to apply any of the strategies outlined in this episode. Heart Rate Variability Podcast is a production of Optimal LLC and Optimal HRV. Check us out at optimalhrv.com. Please enjoy the show. Welcome, friends, to the Heart Rate Variability Podcast. I'm Matt Bennett, just here to do a quick introduction of a replay of a classic episode. This episode is my interview with Dr. Ina Khazan around resonance frequency breathing. This is a topic that we've seen a lot of interest in, especially since we launched the Optimal Zone in the app. And I just thought for our new listeners, this would be a good episode to bring back up in the feed. And also for our long time listeners, re-listening to this episode myself, I always learn things from Dr. Ina Khazan. So wanted to bring this back into the feed, either as a refresher for folks, or if you haven't listened to this episode, it is one of those classics, one of our most popular episodes. So without any more to do, here is Dr. Ina Khazan talking about resonance frequency breathing. Welcome, friends, to the Heart Rate Variability Podcast. I am so excited today to have my good friend, colleague, Dr. Ina Khazan, here to talk about a subject we've actually had people reaching out for us to talk about. And Ina and I have tried to schedule this for months now. So I'm glad we actually found a time that works both for us to talk about resonance frequency breathing. And so Ina, welcome back to the show. It's been a couple months. I think our last one together was when we published the book. So just a reminder to folks, the Heartbeat of Business is still out there and selling copies. So always good to see when your sales, tick up here and there. So Ina, welcome to the show today. And since most of our audience are probably familiar with you and your work at this point, let's just jump into RF breathing. So I know, and I've shared with our audience probably a few dozen times at this point, I really believe this has changed my life. It's definitely changed my heart rate variability. And everything I know about HRV is that it's connected to so many things and I'm overdramatic, as you well know. So I'm going to say you introducing me to this topic and getting in my app has at least been a huge contributor to my all-time average going from about 40 to now over 80. There are some other things I contribute to that, but if I was looking for one thing I changed, it was integrating this into my mindfulness practice. So let's start out with the basics for our listener. RF breathing, what is it?
All right. Well, first of all, thanks so much for having me back. I'm so glad that we got a chance to, finally schedule this conversation. And I am so impressed with your heart rate variability and the difference you've made for yourself with resonance frequency is amazing. We could all hope, to be a little bit like you.
In that way, at least. I don't know if I'd encourage much else, but at least in that way.
Well, that's a good way, right? That's one good way. So resonance frequency breathing. It's a optimal breathing rate that stimulates the heart rate to oscillate in ways that produce the highest heart rate oscillations, meaning that your heart rate goes up as much as possible with each breath in and goes down as much as possible with each breath out, which is heart rate variability, and that is what we want. And resonance frequency breathing is a way to train heart rate variability to produce these high oscillations at the time of practice. It's kind of like a workout for your nervous system, right? So, just like when you go to the gym and, lift some dumbbells and throw some kettlebells around, your muscles get stronger each time. And you don't need to keep those dumbbells and kettlebells around with you in order to keep your muscle strength, right? So if you've been working out for a couple of months and a friend asks you to help them lift a couch, you are much better able to do that without anything special at that point. So that working out you've been doing, is doing its job in the background. So resonance frequency breathing does the same thing for your heart rate variability and your autonomic nervous system in general. So for your ability to regulate your activation, your ability to adapt to changes in your environment. So by doing a resonance frequency breathing, ideally 20 minutes a day, trains your nervous system to regulate itself better, so that when you encounter a challenge, your nervous system is already better at meeting that challenge. It's going to be easier for you to respond in healthier, more helpful ways without necessarily having to do anything special. So those 20 minutes a day where resonance frequency breathing drives maximum heart rate oscillations, it trains, it trains the foundations of heart rate variability, it trains the main sources of heart rate variability, so that when you return to normal breathing, your heart rate variability becomes a little bit higher, and over time, gains strength, just like, Matt, you've noticed with resonance frequency training, your heart rate variability at baseline, at normal breathing rates increased. That's the idea. Your heart rate variability goes up over time, signaling that your nervous system is better able to regulate itself.
Okay, so let me ask you too. That's a great, simple definition. I think I'm just going to listen to that over and over again until I get that down. So, great introduction to it. So, a couple of follow-up questions here. One is, where did this come from? Because it is and maybe you can talk a little bit about how we establish it, because I'm someone who's probably read, oh man, at least 30 books on mindfulness over the years, if not more. Probably double that with everything I've read, podcasts. And until I met you and got into heart rate variability, even with heart rate variability, getting into that, hadn't even heard this term. So something that I credit to doubling my heart rate variability. I have a master's degree in psychology. I'm a brain nerd. I'm a polyvagal nerd, and never heard about this. So I love maybe just a little bit of kind of history, and why isn't this out there in a bigger way in the mindfulness arena, which I know leads to a lot of your work in this arena as well.
Why it's not more out there, I'm honestly not entirely sure. I guess that's what we are doing, is helping get this, be more out there. But the history goes back to some of this work was initially done in the former Soviet Union, particularly in Russia, by a scientist named Yevgeny Vaschillo. So he met an American scientist, Paul Lehrer. Paul Lehrer's at Rutgers at Robert Wood Johnson Medical School, and so Dr. Lehrer went to Russia, to St. Peter, Leningrad at the time. He was interested in psychophysiology, so he met Yevgeny Vaschillo, who was doing this work on heart rate variability. They started, talking about it, working on it together, and eventually Dr. Vaschillo came over to New Jersey, and he and Dr. Lehrer were working together for many years. And it's from their work that resonance frequency breathing as a way to train heart rate variability emerged. So the way this works is your many systems in the body oscillate. Right? Your heart rate goes up and down, your blood pressure goes up and down. And they were working with, how do these systems oscillate together and how do they play off of each other? So this term resonance came into play. Resonance is a physics term, right? It's not a term that's specific to HRV. It's not a term specific to physiology. It's just a term that describes a system that has two parts that interplay with each other, and one part of the system stimulates another to produce maximum oscillations. So that's resonance. you can think of it as pushing a child on a swing, right? So as
I was
you,
hoping we'd get to that analogy.
yeah, so that I love that analogy. As you, you as an adult, pushing the child in a swing. So that's the two parts of this oscillating system, right? You and the child in a swing is the other part. And you can push the swing in many ways, right? You can push the swing, like once with a lot of force, and the swing is going to go up, but not evenly, right? It's going to, be quite bumpy, and then it's going to come down, and then, not go up much after that, and the child is not going to be too thrilled with you. Or you can push the swing with short, frequent bursts, right? And the swing is going to go up just a little bit and come right back down. And again, the child is going to be quite unhappy with you. You're not doing a good job of entertaining them. Or you can figure out a way of pushing that swing in even measured ways, right? Push up, let it come down, push up, let it come down, and figure out a way to push that swing so it goes up as much as possible and come down as much as possible. It goes up as much as possible and comes down as much as possible. And it does that, again, this is a regular, measured, smooth way. And that's when the child is happy, right? And then, they're flying up, they're coming down, it's smooth, it's fun, it's safe, it's entertaining. The same, so that's a resonance frequency rate of pushing the swing, right? It maximizes the way in which the swing goes up, and in which it comes down. Your heart rate and your breath work in the same way, right? So you stimulating the swing is just like your breath stimulating the heart rate. As you breathe in, your heart rate goes up. As you breathe out, your heart rate goes down. And you can find an optimal way of breathing that will produce these maximum oscillations, the maximum way for the heart rate to go up and come down maximally as well. And this is that interplay that Dr. Lair and Dr. Vascello found and tested to see how exactly this works in the cardiovascular system. So they found that for most people, breathing somewhere between 4 and 7 breaths per minute creates this resonance interplay relationship. So we all have our own resonance frequency breathing rate that will maximize our heart rate ability. And we need to find what that resonance frequency breathing rate is for each one of us, and then use it to maximize the efficiency of HRV training.
So I think we've well established that 4 breaths a minute is the best rate to breathe at. At least that's what I'm putting on the t-shirt.
Certainly is for you.
I want to start get the 4.0s together. But so we have, I know in the app, you do, I believe, 7 2-minute exercises at different breathing rates to establish your specific RF breathing rate. And mine is 4 breaths per minute, which sometimes I find, even if I'm sitting down doing it, I can work up a sweat doing, especially early on. I mean, when you call it a workout, especially when I go up to high altitudes here in Colorado, it does feel like that. Now, the more I do it, just like any other activity, the less I feel like exertion. It becomes more of a natural, like the child on the swing. I feel like there's a flow to it that develops. But what are we looking for? So what is happening when I go through our assessment at 4.0 and for other people's maybe 7 breaths a minute, that this is good for Ina, this is good for Matt, and we all just shouldn't breathe at 6 breaths per minute, which is kind of standardized in the literature that I have seen before really diving into this.
Yeah. So let me address the 6 breaths per minute. That is the breathing rate that kind of gets close enough for enough people that quite a few research studies, rather than determining everyone's resonance frequency breathing rate, would just have everybody breathe at 6 breaths per minute. And 6 breaths per minute is better than not pacing yourself. We're not breathing within that range at all, not doing any of this training. But there are a couple of studies that have shown that determining your actual resonance frequency breathing rate does produce more efficient results. Increases HRV a little bit more, reduces symptoms a bit more. So given that HRV training is something that we really commit to and make time for in our lives, resonance frequency assessment takes 14 minutes.
Yeah.
So adding that one little step and determining what your resonance frequency breathing rate is, then maximizes the efficiency of your training. So all the time that you're dedicating to doing your HRV training, if you just add this little 15-minute part to it, your training will be that much more efficient. And it's possible that your resonance frequency breathing rate is indeed 6 breaths per minute.
Yeah.
Which will serve to confirm that you are getting the most out of that training. But there are certainly quite a few people for whom 6 breaths per minute is not exactly it, right? You're at 4. I'm normally at 5. There are people who are at 6.5, 5.5, 4.5, etc. I think it's very much worth it to determine your own unique resonance frequency breathing rate. It is also important. I'm glad you mentioned this idea of exertion, right? When you're slowing down your breath that much, right? Most people breathe 14, 15 breaths per minute at baseline. So slowing down to 7 breaths per minute or below is not necessarily natural.
Right.
And for some people, it can feel effortful.
Mm-hmm.
We do want the breath to be effortless. That does make a difference. Certainly makes it more pleasant, but also more efficient. So one thing I recommend for people to do prior to determining their resonance frequency breathing rate is first practice breathing at, say, 6 breaths per minute, just for the sake of learning how to slow down that much. So I don't want people breathing at 6 breaths per minute just all the time, right? Again, I do think that determining your RF breathing rate is incredibly important. But it is first important to learn how to slow down. For folks who jump into resonance frequency determination without becoming comfortable with slow breathing first, the assessment might not actually be as accurate because you may not be able to keep pace, right? If it's uncomfortable, you may not be able to actually, slow down to 4 breaths per minute. There are people who say, oh, I feel so much more comfortable breathing at 6 breaths per minute, but the data shows that that their resonance frequency is 4, right? So the question becomes, well, is this accurate? Should I be breathing at 6? The data most of the time is actually, if it's pointing you to 4, I would go with that. But it's really important to learn how to be comfortable. It is possible that your resonance frequency breathing rate is initially uncomfortable just because you're not used to breathing that way, but it is the one that's producing these maximal oscillations in your HRV. So spending a little time getting comfortable with low and slow breathing around 6 breaths per minute is, I really can't emphasize enough how important it is. And I know quite a few people have attempted to skip that step and just, get to the good stuff, figure out your RF breathing rate, but don't do it. Get comfortable with slow breathing first.
Well, and I'd love our listeners, if they haven't, to go back to Dr. Dave and my episodes on nasal breathing too. I just of how we take in air and get air out can just add bonuses to this as we go through and really practice this breathing. And so, one thing, and I won't make this just about Matt's questions about his RF, but here in Colorado, we have a unique thing. And as a traveler, having sometimes traveling, I was in DC a couple weeks ago, and then I spent a lot of time up in Keystone, Colorado, which is about 10,000 feet. And obviously very different oxygen levels. And then I live sort of halfway between those at about 5,000, a little over 5,000 feet. So I believe I've learned from you that altitude really doesn't make that big of a difference. And that it's more of the rate that's important. We're not really dealing with oxygen, carbon dioxide. That's kind of a whole nother podcast, very important, but not really what we're doing with RF frequency. Am I in the ballpark with that?
Yeah. So your resonance frequency breathing rate does not change. let me expand on this a little bit. It does change for kids.
Yeah.
Once a person reaches their final adult size, their resonance frequency, breathing rate does not change. The only aspect that seems to influence our resonance frequency is how tall we are. That seems to be the only thing. And there is a correlation. Taller people tend to have lower resonance frequency breathing rates. So, Matt, you're at 4, you're certainly following that correlation nicely.
Yeah.
It's not a perfect correlation. I have seen people whose resonance frequency is 4 and they're not like Matt. And I've seen people who are tall with higher resonance frequency, but there is generally a correlation. Let me also say that lower resonance frequency is no better than higher resonance frequency. It's just what it is. It's not a competition, even for you, Matt. Not a competition. It's just like it's just like what's your hair color? What's your eye color? What's your resonance frequency breathing rate? It's just what breathing rate produces maximum oscillations of your body, and that's it. It doesn't change. You're not supposed to increase it or decrease it. It's just a characteristic that that's yours. Okay. So if you have kids, their resonance frequency will change as they grow. So and until probably the age of, I don't know, maybe 20 or so, you want to retest your resonance frequency every year. Kids' resonance frequency tends to be higher, maybe, like 6 to 10, depending on the age. Once they hit about 13, the resonance frequency becomes, that same as it is for adults, about 4 to 7, but it might still keep changing until that teenager, gets to their final adult size. So just something to keep in mind. Once you are at your final adult height, and weight does not change your resonance frequency, just to I comfort those whose weight changes as as we go through our adulthood. But once we are at the final adult size, resonance frequency remains the same, and it doesn't matter if you are at sea level, if you are at 5,000 feet, 10,000 feet, it does not matter. Resonance frequency breathing does help at altitude because it helps with oxygen absorption. Right. So, if you find yourself, in Keystone or in Quito, Ecuador, 10,000 feet, what helps to get the most oxygen out of the air is actually do some resonance frequency breathing, because what happens is you're breathing in at the same time as your heart rate is speeding up. So you're extracting as much oxygen as possible from the lungs, and then the heart is able to, get it to the rest of the body. The amount of oxygen in the air actually doesn't change. There is 21% oxygen at sea level. There is 21% oxygen, at higher altitudes. What changes is with atmospheric pressure, the distance between oxygen molecules becomes larger, right? So the oxygen molecules are more scattered. So with each breath, once you are, past, 5,000-6,000 feet, that you're effectively taking in less oxygen with each breath. And when you're at 10,000 feet, you may not be getting quite enough. It doesn't really change what you're supposed to be doing with your breathing. You just want to make sure that you are getting, enough oxygen. You've acclimated to altitude, et cetera. And at some point, you just, obviously, as you go up higher, there may not be enough oxygen, or the oxygen molecules are so spread out that, you need supplemental oxygen. But usually not at 10,000 feet.
Yeah, if you're up that high, you're probably planning to be up that high. So
exactly, hopefully.
So the other thing that I find interesting, and it was funny, it was Dave Janelle, who's been on our podcast, is where we were at the applied bio AP.
AAPB, Association for Applied Psychophysiology and Biofeedback.
Yeah, it's such a mouthful. I need to really memorize that, which you are currently president of, if I'm
president-elect.
President-elect. All right. So, we were huddling, and one of the things with our app, and I know we've got a really, really exciting upgrade coming out soon. And we'll hold off on that upgrade until it comes out, because I'm so excited about it, both with my own practice and to get it out to the world. But the interesting thing is we were kind of huddling, and we were all HRV nerds, and comparing our RF rates, trying to argue that ours was the best, even though we know better. The one thing I thought was interesting that I hadn't paid attention to, because I sort of do this my 20-minute really mindful practice in the morning, and then I don't usually hook up to a biofeedback device, though I've started to do that a little bit more, because I do kind of a Tai Chi moving mindfulness meditation at RF frequency, and I just find that spectacular. Gets us my pre-work kind of warm up, pre-game kind of warm up for work. And then I do like 20 minutes at night while I watch TV, basically as bonus. It's like an extra credit project where you're not probably doing everything you need to do, but you just want to pick up some points along the way. One of the things that I got alerted to, I think was Dave, but Janelle was talking about it as well, is when we focused on the breathing, turning off the television and really focusing, doing a mindfulness with the biofeedback, we'll actually see more fluctuation in our heart rate. So, initially I kind of thought, well, I'm doing it. Focus isn't that important, because I could do curls and watch TV at the same time in the gym. I don't think my biceps are getting any less of a workout. But we were all kind of seeing this thing. Well, when we're actually paying attention to only our breathing or a mindfulness activity playing in the background, we saw a lot more fluctuation. Then I went home and tried it, and I'm like, oh, wow, this is really cool stuff. So do you have any idea what's going on here, and why mental focus improves the variability during a RF frequency breathing practice?
Yeah, I do think we need a little more research to pinpoint exactly what's going on. So I will give you some educated guesses. I think partly it just maybe that we're actually better able to follow the resonance frequency breathing rate when our full attention is on it, right? I think that's sort of the simplest explanation. If part of your brain is focused on something else, you're probably not following your resonance frequency breathing rate, even if you have a pacer in front of you, not following it as accurately. So that's one. Two, what's driving these oscillations, the ups and downs of the heart rate, the accelerations and decelerations, is your vagal nerve, which is one of the cranial, it's the 10th cranial nerve that's comprises most of our parasympathetic nervous system. And the vagal nerve has, projections obviously into the body, and it has projections into the brain. So when, heart variability training stimulates the vagal nerve, so I suspect, and we do know that there is an association between more mindful states and an increase in heart rate variability. So I suspect that what's happening when you're more focused and you're engaging the parts of the brain that are also helping to engage the vagal nerve and further stimulate the heart rate oscillation. So I think you're getting just more bang for your buck by engaging both the mind and the body.
Fascinating. It makes total sense too with what we know about the vagal nerve. So the final piece here that I kind of want to touch on a little bit, because I know I've got the world's expert on this question on the podcast with me today, is I need a new analogy here. So if you can help me with that, that would be great. But having integrated RF frequency into my mindfulness practice, the best, and I love my analogies, as our listeners will know. So I always have to find an analogy, or I don't understand the world. So I've used this analogy of basically integrating RF frequency RF breathing into my morning mindfulness practice is like mindfulness on steroids without any of the bad stuff. It was just like this supplement. I mean, I'm sure a lot of our listeners know the tremendous research behind different forms of meditation out there, mindfulness activities, things like yoga, Tai Chi, loving kindness. There's all this research into these various techniques. I felt like as somebody who does moving meditation, that RF just is just like steroids. It's like I said, I haven't come up with a better analogy. So I would just love to get your one. If you have a better analogy for me, I'd love to hear it. But two, I just like bring us with this connection. Give the title of your book, which was just a huge resource for me to bring these two together. And I think brilliant piece of work that we need out there in the world in a very important way right now. But just the overlap as your work has done, bringing RF breathing into, I guess, more traditional mindfulness practices.
I kind of like mindfulness and steroids without
okay. I did it. It works. People get it. It's just don't take steroids. I'm not promoting steroid use. That just that caveat.
Yeah, I'll see if I can think of another analogy. I guess you can think of it as feeding two birds with one bagel.
Yeah,
right.
Like
you're accomplishing two goals at once. The interesting part is the research on mindfulness and HRV shows a couple things. One is, heart rate variability is a really good index of self-regulation. So, HRV is an excellent way to assess the effectiveness of mindfulness-based interventions, for example. But the research around, does meditation increase heart rate variability is actually quite mixed. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. And again, we need more research on this, but I suspect what's happening is when people are meditating, they don't necessarily slow down their breathing, and they certainly don't necessarily slow down to their resonance frequency breathing rate. Some very experienced meditators actually slow down way more, right? They end up breathing at like 2.5, 3 breaths per minute, which is slower than optimal, right? So they're not maximizing their heart rate variability. Or people who breathe a little bit faster during meditation, again, they're not maximizing their heart rate variability. So I suspect that that's the reason for the mixed research. Some people probably end up close to their resonance frequency, and that helps increase HRV, and those that are higher or or lower don't increase HRV sufficiently. There a couple of studies that have looked at mindfulness using slow paced breathing, and they usually pace at 6 breaths per minute, are finding very positive results. And I suspect that that's exactly why, that they're pairing, they're pairing two of these really powerful interventions together. So we really do need more research, to see how the combination of the two works compared to, each one of them separately. As far as increases in HRV go. So when I do think you get more bang for your buck, you are utilizing the good steroids, or you're feeding two birds with one bagel, whatever you want to call it. If you're going to be spending your time, if you're going to be dedicating the 20 minutes a day to practice, why not combine two interventions that will engage both the autonomic nervous system and the central nervous system, your brain, in a way that helps in some ways actually synchronize their activity, and most importantly, they're both working on self-regulation, right? Mindfulness is a self-regulation tool. HRV biofeedback is a self-regulation tool. So you're combining the two together, and you are just getting more out of the practice.
Interesting. So almost maybe like in the swing analogy, which I love, is like the 6 breaths per minute that's usually integrated in these studies might not be the optimal, but it's going to create a happier child than if you're not paying, if you're just kind of all over the place.
Exactly.
So, yeah, you're still you're getting there. You're going to make the kid happy. Some will be like perfectly in bliss because 6 is close enough or at your RF, but somebody like me with a 4, I could make a small adjustment to make that child even happier and get more benefits out of the practice.
That's exactly right. It's a fairly small adjustment that can make a really big difference.
Awesome. Well, let me get you out on this kind of future thinking question. Is like I said, somebody who's been. I think I read my first mindfulness book. My grandfather gave me something when I was like in fourth grade, and I've been fascinated with it ever since. And then got over being bad at it, and have practiced it consistently for 15 years. Never came across this until I started to learn about picking up your book was the first time I really learned about this and started to think about this clinically as a mental health professional. And like, holy heck, like, one of the reasons I reached out to you initially was like, how do I get this on folks' trauma, homeless, like, how do I get this to populations who maybe we think about mindfulness a little bit, but folks that really need to maximize any recovery time. So I just love for just to look into the future is something that I think with technology, where I think one of the reasons I may have not have heard about it is if most of the history of RF breathing, I'd have to probably get hooked up to a very expensive machine to get my RF breathing rate. So I just love to ask you a question as now, with our app at $5 a month, with 14 minutes, with a fairly inexpensive, monitor on. So very, very, you'd probably pay for 2 years of our app, just what it would take to initially establish it historically. What is sort of your hope for this as a leader in this field who's written, again, tremendous books on this subject, speaks so eloquently about it? Where do you hope that the power of this goes in the future?
Oh, I certainly hope it goes to being available to every single human being out there. Because if you really think about it, it's fairly simple.
Mm-hmm.
And we found a way to make this be inexpensive, right? Between modern technology and some of the a lot of the work put into the app, this is now available to anyone who is interested.
Yeah.
Time investment is on the one hand, fairly minimal, 20 minutes a day. It can feel, like, wait a minute, I don't have 20 minutes a day. So it certainly is a time investment. But in the grand scheme of things, it's not a huge time commitment. It's very possible to integrate this gradually into your life. And I really do hope that everybody takes advantage of this. This is not just for people who, have issues, although I guess since every single person out there has issues, I guess it is for everybody who has issues. The point is, this is not necessarily to work with a particular problem. HRV training is a really powerful way to work with trauma and with chronic illnesses and depression, anxiety, etc. But it's also just a really good way to improve our lives. It's a really good way to improve our well-being. So I really do hope that everybody gets a hold of this, because who can't get better at self-regulation, right? Who couldn't benefit from responding in healthier, more helpful ways to stressors coming our way, right? There isn't a single person out there who doesn't wish to respond in a more helpful way, at least some of the time. So I really hope that folks pick up a HRV monitor, get our app, and get started with this training. All of this process is described in a lot of detail in my book, Biofeedback and Mindfulness in Everyday Life, and we walk you through this step by step in the app. Optimal HRV is the only app out there that will walk you through in this very concrete, easy to understand way for how to get your resonance frequency breathing rate. You learn how to breathe slowly first. As I mentioned, that's quite important. And Optimal actually provides a way for you to do that. Just experimenting with different pacers and getting comfortable. And then getting to your resonance frequency determination, where you breathe at 2 minutes at 7 breaths per minute, 6.5, 6, 5.5, 5, 4, and no, 5, 5, 4.5, and 4. So 14 minutes. There is a little bit of a break between each one to, if you need a break between the different breathing rates, but you go through them in this order, and then at the end, the algorithm spits out, this is your ideal breathing rate. The app is looking at several determinants of ideal breathing rate, and tells you which of these breathing rates produces that for you. And then you can use that resonance frequency breathing rate, or your ideal breathing rate, in your subsequent HRV training. So it's not simple in a sense that you do need to dedicate some time, and you do need to commit to doing this, but it's not complicated otherwise. And the app really does make it as easy as possible. You can then, once you have your resonance frequency breathing rate, you can integrate it into your mindfulness and self-compassion practices, and get on your way to improving self-regulation, improving well-being, and just being healthier and happier.
Awesome. And as part of that, I know I've asked 3 last questions now, but one of the things that I've seen, and you sort of led into this as well, is one is I've seen mindfulness for quite a while now as both a practice and a skill set. And I think in your book, using Flair is what I've adopted, because it's such a good model, bringing in some of the skills. And how do you, I practice, and then I'm sort of building those skills. Like you gave that great analogy, as I go do curls, kettlebells in the gym. Then when somebody asks me to move, I can perform at a higher rate. I've also found, just within my own stumbling through life as I do with RF, I found also, like, if I have a few minutes of quiet before a training, I do a little RF breathing rate. I do it a little bit when I'm on, this is a great practice for me, when I'm on the ski lift going up the hill. If I'm going to go on a good run, I practice RF just because I'm on a chairlift. I don't have anything else to do. But I also have found this to be a useful tool, just to almost, I guess the best way I could describe it is I almost level out. Whereas, at least for me as a trainer, you've got a whole lot of things going on. You're trying to set up your technology, you're talking to people, this, that, the other. And if I can just sneak away for a quick moment and even do like 2 minutes of RF, which I know is probably not changing a whole lot of my physiology, but I've almost practiced it for so many hours now that calm, almost just get at that 4 breaths per minute. It's like, okay, I'm ready to go, not necessarily even relaxed, but I'm ready to perform. And I just I know you work with athletes, special forces. Have other people found kind of the usefulness as a tool, sort of in the moment of performance or right before a performance?
Yes, absolutely. And this is a really good way to point this out, Matt. The 20 minutes a day is like this, just like this workout that prepares, your body for self-regulation, that trains the ability of the nervous system to self-regulate. And then when you are, preparing for a performance, or before something stressful, or in the middle of a stressful situation, as long as you have that foundational training. So this is important. Just doing a couple of minutes of resonance frequency breathing every once in a while is not going to do a whole lot. It might help a little bit in the moment, but not a whole lot. You do have to establish that, foundational training. But once that's there, and, let's say you are, preparing for that, ski run on the chairlift, getting a couple of minutes of breathing does 2 things. One is you can at this point quickly get into your body into that better self-regulatory state. It's a nice way to remind your body to self-regulate, because at this point, with all the training you've been doing, your body knows how to do it, so it just needs a reminder. And our bodies learn a lot, bodies and brains learn a whole lot by association, the so-called, classical or Pavlovian conditioning, right? Where, when, one stimulus gets associated with another, we can then start producing the result that in the past would not have come about. So that state of self-regulation, as you said, Matt, it's not relaxation. And I think this is really important. This is not a relaxation practice. This is a self-regulation practice. So when you do this practice before a ski run or before a presentation, your body prepares for performance and action. If you do this before going to sleep, your body is going to prepare to wind down and go to sleep, because that's what self-regulation is all about, adjusting your activation to whatever your needs are, right? So by doing this foundational practice, you are associating this kind of breathing with better self-regulation. Right, that's the Pavlovian conditioning. You do the breathing, it creates better self-regulation. That's the natural part of it. And then just taking a few breaths, which in the past would not have done a whole lot, now because of this association, because of this conditioning, produce a state of much better self-regulation because your body is used to that. And that is a really powerful in the moment tool. You can be going into a stressful meeting, you take 30 seconds, to take, 3 low and slow breaths at your resonance frequency, and your body is in a much better regulated state. So it can be helpful in the moment, as long as you're doing your longer practices as well.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a great way to end up. You said it really quick. Say the name of your book one more time.
Biofeedback and mindfulness in everyday life.
Get it, people. Really, and I love Ina just as a friend and a colleague, but the book really is so important to really from a user perspective, because it's really, I read it and all I could think about the first time I read through it was me, because I wanted to pull the goodies into my life, and then thinking about it from a clinical perspective, really integrating this in. We've got the technology now to really supplement mental health care. I really see like RF breathing practice, throw some mindfulness on it, use mindfulness on steroids. It's like, as a therapist, the old school homework was always journaling, and journaling is still important. There's a lot of really cool research behind journaling. This is just like the ultimate homework assignment for folks in therapy. It's I think, with all the health benefits that we associate with an increased in heart rate variability, I really believe is a huge revolution that your book really gives us a roadmap to help implement both into our personal lives, for our family members, loved ones, but also, if you're into helping healing, or if you're a trainer, if you're a coach, like I said, getting people to do this and practice this between sessions, between workouts, is just going to boost your outcomes and your work with folks. So it's exciting to be like right at the beginning of this wave, and swimming out there with you, my friend. So thank you. Like I said, we've got some really incredible updates to the app coming out around this, which I'm going to have you back to talk about, because we're even taking this up, maybe adding growth hormones to our steroid regimen here coming up. So I will continue to work on my analogy, but Ina, thank you so much. And as always, you can find show notes, links, reach out to us at optimalhrv.com, and we look forward to our next episode. So Ina, thanks so much.
Thank you, Matt.